Kunja Bihari Kunja Bihari Yashoda Nandana Vrajana Sanjana Nandana Vrajana Sanjana Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhavan Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopi Jana Bharata Girbharadhari Yashoda Nandana Vrajana Ranjana Jamuna Tira Vanachari Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare Jaya Radha Madhava Radha Madhava Radhe Jaya Goranita Jaya Goranita Jaya Goranita Jaya Goranita Jaya Jaya Prabhupada 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada Prabhupada Jaya Jaya Prabhupada. Alrighty.
All right.
Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to this very, very special class on Srimad Bhagavatam. We'll be continuing off to Canto 4, Chapter 25, entitled The Characteristics of King Pranjana. And today we'll be doing verse 20. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudiraye Nashta Praiswa Bhadrishu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Sloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naistaki. Okay, let's get started. Yadrichaya Katam Tatra Darsa Pramadottamam Bhrityaya Dasavir Yantim Ekaika Satanayakaya Yadrichaya Katam Tatra Tadarsa Pramadottamam Bhrityaya Dasavirayantim Ekaika Satanayakaya Yadrichaya Gatam Tatra Nadarsa Pramadottamam Bhrityaya Dasavirayantim Ekaika Satanayakaya.
Just we want to be real precise about the Sanskrit, that last word, third line, I am peace. There's a long mark over the eyes. Two eyes,
Thank you.
Just one of those little things. That rich Tayagatam Tatra.
Dasa Brahmadottamam Prataya Tasvirayatim Ekaika Satanayakai
Yadrishchaya Gatantatra
Yadrichaya Gatam Tatra
Yadasha Brahmadottamam
Darsa Brahmadottamam
Yadashavirayatim
Vrityardasabhirayantim
Ekaika Shatanayakari
Ekaika Satanayakai Yadrichaya Gatam Tatra Radasha Brahmadottamam Vrityaya Dasavirayantim Ekaika Satanayakai. Okay, word for word. Yadrichaya,
Yadrishchaya
all of a sudden,
all of a sudden
without engagement.
without engagement
Agatam,
Agata
arrived.
arrived
Tatra,
Tatra
there.
there
The Darsha,
Yadasha
he saw.
Esau
Pramada,
Brahmada
one woman.
one woman
Uttamam,
Uttamam
very beautiful.
very beautiful
Hridai,
Victory
surrounded by servants.
surrounded by servants
Dashabhi,
Dashahi
10.
and
Ayantim,
Ayatim
coming forward.
coming forward
Eka,
Eka Eka
each one of them.
each one of them
Shata,
Shata
of hundreds.
of hundreds
Nayakai,
Nayakai
the leaders. Translation purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. While wandering here and there in that wonderful garden, King Puranjana suddenly came in contact with a very beautiful woman who was walking there without any engagement. She had 10 servants with her, and each servant had hundreds of wives accompanying him. Please repeat after me. While wandering here and there
while wandering here and there
in that wonderful garden,
in that wonderful garden
King Puranjana suddenly came in contact
King Parajana suddenly came in contact
with a very beautiful woman
with a very beautiful woman
who was walking there without any engagement.
who was walking there without any engagement.
She had 10 servants with her,
She had 10 servants with her,
and each servant had hundreds of wives accompanying him.
each servant had hundreds of wives accompanying him.
Purport. The body has already been compared to a beautiful garden. During youth, the sex impulse is awakened, and the intelligence, according to one's imagination, is prone to contact the opposite sex. In youth, a young man or woman is in search of the opposite sex by intelligence or imagination, if not directly. The intelligence influences the mind, and the mind controls the 10 senses. 5 of these senses gather knowledge, and 5 work directly. Each sense has many desires to be fulfilled. This is the position of the body and the owner of the body, Puranjana, who is within the body. Om Gyanadhamrandhasya Gyananjana Salakaya Chakshu Ummilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Namo Bhishtam Sapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swavadantikam He Krishna Karuna Sindho Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopasha Gopaka Kanta Raha Kanta Namosute Tapta Kanchana Gourangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sudevi Paramami Hari Pre Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhuvya Vacha Patitanam Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namah Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunavada Pasha Teresitarine Jai Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Prabhupada Varavaya Sutta Vinam Tadram Pasati Patatatam Vinaguru Tekstarne Chaksasayama. So today's purport is really focused on two main things: the attraction between man and woman and the senses. So in every form of life, there is this attraction, whether it's animals, insects. This is what's described constantly within Prabhupada's books and the Vedic literature, is the ultimate binding force to this material world, is this connection, the sexual connection between man and woman. And it's everywhere. In the human form, sometimes we think it's something very special, something very unique, that, oh my gosh, like I have this beautiful partner and this and that, and they're my whole world. And we act like it's something so unique to us only. Even having kids, we plan to think that this is something so special to me. But in reality, even the cockroaches are doing these exact same things. They're not anything special or unique to us. What's unique to us is we have the intelligence to think deeper. That's the only thing that really separates the human form and the animal form. Otherwise, just like the animals, we have a place to stay, we eat, we sleep, we mate, and we defend what we have. Nothing different. And one may say, well, I'm an engineer, or I'm this, or I'm that. But okay, suppose you are using intelligence in a way that animals don't usually use, because animals aren't making computers, they're not making cars, they're not doing things like this. But then what are you doing with that money and that free time you have? Eating, sleeping, mating, defending. You're not really doing anything different. This is just glorified animal life. What really makes the human life different? It's the fact that we can think on a more intellectual level, on a deeper level. A dog's not going to go around saying, my owner just called me this name and threw a shoe at me 2 weeks ago, and I'm still thinking about that exact thing. How dare he call me that name? Wait till I can do something to him. No, a dog doesn't think like that. Or, oh, wow, I once had this one love 2 weeks ago with just down the road. She was a beautiful poodle, and I think about her all the time now, but she moved away. No, dogs don't think like that. The human form is more in depth, more put together for a higher purpose. So we should use it in such a way, we should take advantage of that. Because otherwise we're just living an animal life. So we get a chance to think, why am I here? Why am I existing? Why am I going through all these things constantly? Why are these things happening to me? I have to face birth, I have to face old age, I have to face disease, and I have to face ultimately death. That's the biggest one for everyone, is why do I have to die? What happens after death? This is the age-old question. What happens when I die? Because we've been living and experiencing life. But to even try to imagine what death is like is really difficult because we don't know what that's like. We can't really comprehend what death exactly is intellectually. Or I guess, yeah, we'll just say intellectually for lack of better words. And then not only do you have to face these four things, but you have to face troubles from the mind and body. You know, so many people, especially nowadays, are facing different types of mental illnesses, whether it's depression, anxiety, all kinds of different things. Or bodily pains. There's so many things, and cancer, you got diseases, all kinds of things happen in this body, even if you just break a leg or anything like that. And then you got those inflicted by other people or other beings. So, you know, mosquito attacks you, or someone comes up and robs you, or they say something mean to you. You have to face these things. And ultimately, you also have to face natural disasters, things that happen naturally. It's cold now, so now when you wake up, you gotta face the bitter cold. Some places it's freezing, and they got feet and feet of snow, or it's flooding elsewhere, or there's a tornado elsewhere. These things are constantly happening. Why are these things constantly happening? Why do we have to face these things? You know, we all want to be happy. We want to feel comfortable. We don't want to have to face discomfort. But why do we have to face discomfort? Well, ultimately, when we think about it, and especially when we come to reading scriptures, even the Bible and the Quran and other various scriptures confirm that this isn't the ultimate destination. We're not supposed to be comfortable here. It's not meant to be comfortable. If it was comfortable, then we'd be focused on ourselves the whole time. But because it's not comfortable, it puts us in a position to figure out how can we make it comfortable. And after trying so many things and so many things failing, we eventually come, maybe many, many lifetimes, to a realization that there's a God, I have a connection with him, and I'm not even from this material creation, and this is not my ultimate destination. I'm supposed to, however that may be, I don't know quite yet, but I've been hearing about all these different scriptures, all these different cultures, so let me check it out. And then you dive deeper and try learning more and more. Okay, there's more to this. There's a process. Because without these difficulties, we wouldn't try to do anything. There'd be nothing to it. Just like even in the material world, people often say, what is the use of getting something if you don't have to work hard for it? You wouldn't value it. There's no value to it. So what more so would it be if we have to work hard for Krishna? You know, we took it for granted. We had it all, and we took it for granted. We came to this material world because, okay, Krishna, I had you like since time immemorial for eternity. Let me try something different. Let me try something without you. Let me do something on my own. I've been doing the whole you something for me now. So we got that opportunity. Now we gotta work our way back to including Krishna and trying to learn how do we exactly incorporate you in my life, and actually how do I incorporate myself into your life? How is that supposed to work? Because we're eternally connected. You are the supreme being and the supreme person, the original person, and I'm just a tiny spark of you. Connection, just like a spark of fire is connected with the fire. But when the spark of fire is out of the fire, it's useless. Position is we've left the spark, the whole fire, and our spark is dying out. So we have to learn this. Now, this process means that we have to learn sense control. Because the whole thing that's keeping us stuck doing the same old thing, life after life, is that we think we're going to juice out the material world through our senses. We're going to be able to satisfy our senses with the things in this material world. That is the ultimate goal of life, and that is ultimately what I want, is to enjoy my senses, because that is the only form of happiness I can experience without Krishna. That's the closest thing we have. So going into this, I took notes on Prabhupada's books and his purports within them. So within the purport, it talks about 10 senses ultimately. Now, I completely forgot about this when reading the Bhagavad Gita. Left my mind. I was like, 10 senses. I can name like 5 and 1 including the mind, but what's the other 5? So after looking in the Bhagavad Gita, the purport to chapter 13, verse 6 through 7, Prabhupada mentions that there are 5 senses for acquiring knowledge, like it mentioned here. And those are the eyes, ears, nose, tongue, and the skin. But then there are also 5 working senses, which is the voice, legs, hands, anus, and genitals. And then Prabhupada goes on to say, then above the senses, there is the mind, which is within, and which can be called the sense within. Therefore, including there are 11 senses altogether. So this is more or less 10 to 11 senses if you include the mind. Now, these things allure us into so many horrible things because we think this is going to be great. And I think we just recently read this maybe a month ago in a purport. But I like to think about this when it comes to the senses and it being a trap. So we'll start with sight. So it's said that there's, moths, they're attracted to light. So at night, if you have a fire, sometimes they just dive into the fire and they just kill themselves completely. And when I first heard this, like a couple years ago, I was like, no way. I went camping and I watched it for myself. I was like, wow, that is totally true. They just are so attracted to light. They don't even think anything about it. I just want to be with that light, and boom, they just burn themselves finished. And then there's the deer. Now, when the deer hears the flute of a hunter, it stops in its tracks and starts listening. Even in the modern day, they use different kinds of calls or whatever, and the deer stops and it listens and it tries looking around to find it. And so since the deer stops in its tracks and it's not paying attention to its other senses, its eyes or anything like that so much, it's trying to focus more on its hearing, and it's not thinking it's a trap or anything, it's just listening. Boom, the hunter gets him. Then we'll go with scent. The bee, when it gets in contact with the lotus, goes crazy in the lotus flower. It'll stay in there all day long, even till the lotus closes back up. And generally, bees can make holes in like trees and stuff, but the bee is not focused on that. So he just dies within the lotus flower until then. He just dies the whole time. And then taste. A fish is swimming, right? And then it sees this bait. Maybe it's a worm, maybe it's another type of fish, whatever it may be. Might not even be any of those things. Could be just plastic. But it sees this thing that looks edible, but it's not seeing the hook that's attached to. So it eats it, swallows it, and boom, fisherman catches him. And then we have the elephants. Now, from my understanding, the way I heard it is that back in the day, I don't know if it's still performed this way, but in order to capture an elephant, specifically a male elephant, they would have a trained she elephant go and lure this elephant till he fell into a pit. And then in that pit, he would stay there for days. That way he'd starve and be thirsty. That way he became weak and couldn't be so strong against the people that caught him. So in this way, the five senses get attracted to these things that we think are going to be great, but ultimately they can result in our end. They can ultimately destroy us. People do it all the time. If some people, they like to watch TV all day, but then they end up sitting all day long doing nothing productive. Maybe they end up with health problems from sitting all the time, or eye problems because of the light all the time. So many things. People listen to music super loud and they end up like deaf by the time they're 25. So many things. Now, in Nectar of Devotion, the very first thing that's mentioned, the very first verse, is that a sober person who can tolerate the urge to speak the mind's demands, the action of anger, and the urges of the tongue, belly, and genitals is qualified to make disciples all over the world. So this gives us the qualification on who is really controlled, self-controlled. But notice that one of the first things mentioned when it comes to the gross senses is the tongue. Now, we already have heard within the Prasadam prayer, Sharira Vidya, that whole prayer, one of those verses is the tongue is the most voracious and uncontrollable. So this drove me into finding this other verse that comes to agree and confirm this claim from Srimad Bhagavatam 11:8-21. And I'll read the verse in purport because the purport really went into depth. And I feel like it really puts into perspective this idea of the tongue. So the verse itself says that although one may conquer all of the other senses, as long as the tongue is not conquered, it cannot be said that one has controlled the senses. However, if one is able to control the tongue, then one is understood to be in control of all the senses. So we see the importance. So even if you can't control your tongue, then you're not sense controlled at all, according to Srimad Bhagavatam. Now, Prabhupada goes in the purport and he says, by eating, one gives energy and activity to all of the senses. And thus, if the tongue is controlled, all the senses will be dragged down to the. Thus, if the tongue is uncontrolled, all the senses will be dragged down to the material platform of existence. Therefore, by all means, one must control the tongue. If one fasts, then all the other senses become weak and lose their potency. The tongue, however, becomes more greedy to taste delicious preparations. And when one finally indulges the tongue, all the senses quickly go out of control. Therefore, Srila Vishwanatha Chakravarti Thakur advises that one accept Maha Prasadam, or the remnants of the Lord's food, in a moderate proportion. Since the tongue's function is also to vibrate, one should vibrate the glorious holy name of the Supreme Lord and taste the ecstasy of pure Krishna consciousness. As stated in the Bhagavad Gita, Rasa Varajam Rasopyasya Param Drishtva Nivartate. Only by the higher taste of Krishna consciousness can one give up the daily lower taste that keeps one in prison in material bondage. So we already see that eating energy, which could give energy or take away energy. So if we eat too much, then we can understand that our senses are likely not going to be under control because they're going to be active. They're going to want more activity. Whereas if we eat a moderate proportion, what's needed, as Prabhupada mentions in other places, one should eat half one's hunger, drink a fourth one's hunger, and leave the other fourth for air. Continuing the purport, Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur states that as long as one's intelligence is materially covered, one cannot understand the pleasure of Krishna consciousness, trying to enjoy without Krishna. The living entity leaves the abode of the Supreme, called Vrajabhumi, and comes down into the material world, where he quickly loses control of his senses. One becomes particularly victimized by the tongue, belly, and genitals, as we just mentioned, which exert intolerable pressure on the conditioned soul. These desires subside, however, when one reestablishes one's blissful relationship with the Lord, who is actually the reservoir of all pleasure. One who is attached to the taste of Krishna consciousness automatically follows all of the rules and regulations of religious life due to spontaneous attraction, Shuddha Sattva, or the mode of pure goodness. Without such spontaneous attraction, one is certainly bewildered by the pushing of the material senses. So, as we see, can drag us down. As we said, it is the most voracious and most uncontrollable sense. And due to this, we can either control ourselves or let ourselves out of control just simply by eating and chanting. Simple process. If you eat Mahaprasam in a proportionate amount and you chant the holy names, you can become self-controlled that easily. But as I mentioned in that translation of the verse, oh wait, no, I didn't get to the one I was going to mention. Okay, now the one that I was going to mention after this is in Bhagavad Gita 264. Krishna says, one who can control his senses by practicing the regulated principles of freedom can obtain the complete mercy of the Lord and thus become free from all attachment and aversion. So we should control our senses by regulative principles. No meat eating, no intoxication, no illicit sex, and no gambling. That right there already makes you, if you could do, you're more easily able to follow the 4 pillars, which are mercifulness, cleanliness, truthfulness, and austerity. Without these things, religious life, practically speaking. But as was mentioned to me before, I thought this was a good point. Even if you are following the 4 regulative principles, but you're still not merciful and you're still not truthful or anything like that, then what is the point? The whole point is to be able to follow the 4 pillars of dharma, which in this age, truthfulness is basically the only thing, and it's barely there. It's barely there. Everything else is broken. So we should follow the regulative principles with the mindset of, I am trying to follow the 4 pillars of dharma of truthfulness, austerity, and mercifulness. Because this is going to help. It doesn't mean that you're automatically Krishna conscious just because you follow these things and you're like this. Doesn't mean you're Krishna conscious like that. But it does set you up to become from the Sattva platform, the mode of goodness, to Shuddha Sattva, the mode of pure goodness on the transcendental platform. It prepares you. So the last verse I found in connection to all this, which kind of wraps up this whole idea of sense control, comes from Bhagavatam, Canto 7, chapter 15, shloka 28, wherein it says, ritualistic ceremonies, regulative principles, austerities, and the practice of yoga are all meant to control the senses and mind. But even after one is able to control the senses and mind, if he does not come to the point of meditation upon the Supreme Lord, all such activities are simply labor and frustration. So, say you do control your tongue, you do control your senses. Do you know the ultimate point of doing that? Do you know what the whole point is? The whole point of everything we should be doing is to give pleasure to Krishna, to be Krishna conscious, think of Krishna, serve Krishna, do everything for Krishna. But if we're too focused on, oh, let me try to be the most regulated out of everyone I know, he's doing that, but no way you're going to see me doing that. And so is that person. It also becomes an ego thing of, I want to be the best. I want to be better. So it can be another trap. And therefore, you don't have control of your mind, which is also one of your senses. So you're still not sense controlled. But even if, say, you aren't thinking it in an egotistically way, what is the point of your sense control if it's not for the purpose of Krishna consciousness? You're just uselessly doing all these things, own pain and pleasure. Oh, I'm going to refrain from doing this or that, but ultimately I'm not going to do anything for Krishna. I'm not going to be focusing on Krishna. I'm just doing the austerity just for austerity's purposes. No, the ultimate goal of everything, the ultimate goal of every activity, every speech, everything should be to please Krishna. It should be bhakti, devotional service out of love for Krishna. We have all these senses, and oftentimes people think that the way to control the senses is to completely avoid all sense objects, which is completely wrong. Because the soul itself has senses. The soul sees, the soul hears, the soul has all these things too. We're not just a blob that just exists. Existence practically includes having a central experience, whether it's hearing, feeling, whatever it may be. There's something more to it than just being. There's more to it, because the soul, since Krishna has senses, we have senses. And if we say God doesn't have senses, then we're saying God has something that we don't have in our material condition, which is saying God's lacking something, which is completely bogus and doesn't make any sense. How could we have something in the material world where we're so constricted and all that God doesn't have? So God has senses, and therefore our soul has senses, ourselves have senses. It's not about avoiding sense objects. It's about learning how do we use these senses in Krishna consciousness. How do we utilize sense objects for Krishna's enjoyment? How do we please his senses? And by pleasing his senses, we please our senses. So this should be the ultimate thing we focus on. If we can realize this one thing, that we're trying to please Krishna with all of our activities, thoughts, minds, actions, even our senses, then one could be situated in sense control, because we're starting to live on a spiritual platform. We're no longer focusing on this body and this body's wants and desires and all that. We're focusing on Krishna's desires and taking our quota that we get from doing so. Oh, I still need to eat, so I get to have prasadam. I still need to be able to speak, so I glorify Krishna, or I chant Krishna's name. I still need to be able to see, which maybe you don't end up being able to see, or other things like this. But the ultimate thing is to focus on trying to include Krishna in everything. in the beginning of Prabhupada's time, when people started, and we still are, for the most part, do this when people come around, it's add Krishna to everything you do. It's not a bunch of do not, but add Krishna and everything else will follow in the process. I know it took me a long time to be able to follow everything, but I try to make sure Krishna was added to every little thing I did, good or bad. And eventually it helped me follow the four regs and so much more. So, in conclusion to today's class, we should make sure that Krishna is the center of our activities, our mind, thought, actions, and so forth. And this way we could be sense controlled and not be influenced by the material modes or material nature situated on that platform of this is for Krishna, not for me. And don't fool yourself on, oh, I'm totally doing this for Krishna, but really it's for me. Anyways, if there's any questions or comments, yes, sir, Prabhu.
One sentence in the purport, I don't know if you talked about it, but Prabhupada says, in youth, a man or a woman is in search of the opposite sex by intelligence or imagination, if not directly. Did you talk about that sentence?
Oh my goodness, you got me. I was completely avoiding that one. No, I didn't, because I didn't quite understand that. But if you do, could you please expound what that means to me?
No, I mean, Prabhupada doesn't say anything more about, well, he says more, but I couldn't quite, I mean, I can guess, speculate about what he means. By intelligence, in search of the opposite sex, by intelligence. So, yeah, it would just be a speculation, so.
Yeah, I was confused on that because I was thinking about
Or
but then
imagination. So what is that? He's either dreaming about or he's actually, making plans to enjoy the woman.
There you go.
That's one way you could say it. Or he's just, dreaming, oh, it'd be so nice if, but then intelligence means.
yeah, the intelligence part kind of threw me off because it says if not directly. So it seemed like it was saying intelligence is indirect, and that kind of confused me because intelligence is usually used directly.
But like sometimes guys, they learn guitar, right? Because they want to get the girl, but they're not actively thinking, oh, I'm doing this because I want to get the girl. It's sort of subconscious, but they're using their intelligence to
Okay.
make themselves more attractive to the opposite sex.
Okay, there's one guess.
I think there's a simple typo there, and what it means is they're either using their intelligence, period, like that's point one, or they're using their imagination indirectly, like the indirectness just goes with the imagination. And also, aside from the typo comment, I remember when I was a teenager, like in high school, I used a lot of my intelligence plotting how to get with the girls. So it's pretty clear to me what he means by that. Using our intelligence for more useful things. But at that time, that's the most useful thing that we can think of. So that's what we do when we're at that age.
So this is the case you're suggesting where, and this is the fourth canto, so the devotees weren't still questioning Prabhupada so much. The editors would ask for clarification if the dictation didn't sound quite right, or what do you mean by that? So you're suggesting that it could have been clarified.
I just think that it was punch.
Yeah, that's either in a proofreader sense or in a conceptual sense. Yeah. Wait, we have a woman.
Okay.
Okay, she knows.
No, if you can read.
In youth, teenager, right? In youth, a man or woman is in search of the opposite sex by intelligence or imagination, if not directly. So the speculation I had was sometimes guys just go right up to a girl and, hey, let's get it on, They don't think. They're just so brazen or thoughtless or whatever.
And which one is that, intelligence or imagination?
No, I'm saying this is,
That would be direct.
that would be directly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
So if you're just imagining it, it's indirect, but you're
Yeah.
still wasting your attention.
yeah. I mean, everything that people do when they're younger, not everything, but the majority of things that people do when they're younger is to make themselves attractive to find a partner, whether they know it or not, right? A girl getting ready, putting makeup on, putting pretty dresses on, that's to make her more attractive, right? That's using her intelligence. She's not directly seeking out a guy, but that's using her intelligence to make herself more attractive. The same with a man. A man does the same thing. He goes to college to become, a lawyer or something like that, to make himself more attractive to the opposite sex. Do you think that person has a passion, that they were born with this passion for the law? No.
That's what I was saying about the civilization. All these big things, exist arrangements for sex. You would say that.
Okay, Ananta Prabhu?
Oh, I remember an ad now about speaking of how in the advertising industry encourages this. There was an ad for Brill Cream, which was hairdressing for men. And the jingle was, Brill Cream, a little dab will do ya. Brill Cream, you look so debonair. Brill Cream, the girls will something to you, flocking to you. And then there's a girl on the screen, she comes in. They'll love to run their fingers through your hair.
Oh my goodness.
So, I mean, yeah, this is so crazy. That's the civilization. Okay, thank you very much.
Well, Lalita explained it very nicely, I thought. I just had another example because I go to LA Fitness to the gym, you know.
Oh, okay.
These guys are
He
down
still
there.
thinks he's in the game.
You know, I'm just trying to keep going what I have left. What's left of Ananta Dev Das. But all these guys are working so hard. And do they really like to go in there and do that every day or every 2 days? And even take steroids and things that are dangerous? What's it all for? You know, some of them are. So that's just what I thought of when we were saying what does it mean to use your intelligence indirectly. Well, like she said, that's about all people do when they're young.
Yeah, I think that's a really good way to put it.
God, the muscle thing is really far out. They work so hard in there.
Yeah.
You know, maybe they're showing off for each other, but
Sometimes
that's a little bit of it.
Sometimes it is like that. There's some people that do it so much that they can't even like touch their own back. That they get like so muscular they can't touch their back,
Yeah, muscle bound.
or they can't even touch their own shoulder.
Well,
Yeah, for what?
all right.
Thank
All right.
goodness for Srila Prabhupada.
Is that all? Do we have any more questions or comments?
No, thank you for the
All
helpful
right.
class up here.
Thank you all so much. Grantara Srimad Bhagavatam ki
Jai.
jai. Srimad Bhagavatam ki. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.